Hi, poets. This is Liz Whiteacre, and I'm here to talk to you about invention. Today, we will explore where do poems come from? We'll want to explore poetry, both as readers and as poets, during this course, because we can learn a lot from both experiences. We'll think about establishing a writing practice and routine in this lesson, and how to identify both a good poem in terms of something we see on the page and that we would like to be able to write ourselves, and also good poem moments. So, as we're out there living life, as we are maybe recording in a notebook our observations, thoughts, feelings, we can start to identify what might make a good poem. And we'll also explore some different ways to get started. Poetry goes back for thousands and thousands of years. In fact, one of the first known poems was an epic of Gilgamesh, and it's estimated to have been written and recorded 4,000 years ago. On the screen, I've shared just a small sampling of some different poems from different cultures and languages that have survived over the centuries, with links if you'd like to click on them and check them out. So this is just a visual representation of the long, long history that humans have with verse and sharing our experiences with each other on the written page. There are two links here I wanted to share with you: the Academy of American Poets and the Poetry Foundation. These are links to two places where you can go and see more contemporary works by poets writing in America in the last 100 years. It's important during the course that we explore multimodal sources. And so by that, I mean maybe you are looking at a book of poetry. You go to Amazon, there's a favorite poet you have, and you have some hard copy collections of books that you're reading and exploring where you can drill down into a particular poet's work. You can also, just like you listen to a full music album by an artist that you like, you can start to finish enjoy that experience that the poet has prepared for you in that book. But you can also find a lot of poetry online, like the links I've just shared with you, blogs, websites, literary magazines. You can also find poetry recorded. YouTube is a great resource for videos. You can also find on iTunes different audio recordings of poems. And you can also find in some literary magazines audio recordings. There are also a lot of videos out there that take different types of graphics to represent poems. For example, Billy Collins, when he was poet laureate, started a video poetry project. And that is very cool to check out, where he read his poems and different artists illustrate them. You can find poetry sneaking up in your social media feeds. Lots of people are producing graphics that incorporate both text from poems, entire poems, quotes from writers, and different photographs and art in order to engage people. You'll find people tweeting their poems. So as you start to pay attention going about your day, look at where are you intersecting with poetry in your life generally, and then make some effort to seek out those types of poems that you are enjoying the most and are perhaps the easiest to consume. Another thing that you should do while you're enjoying the poems that you're reading during this course, and always, is also think about your response to them. I always recommend reading a poem at least twice. So you kind of read through, have that initial response, and then read through again. And as you do, consider, why did you have that first response? Sometimes our first response is, what is this? Right? We're kind of like, I'm confused what's going on. And the second read, a little bit more carefully can help us start to pick apart where do we maybe get derailed, or maybe we missed something because we were reading too quickly, or maybe knowing how the poem resolves itself helps us understand why things are happening earlier. You can also think about maybe you have an emotional response. What is it the poet's done in that poem to solicit that uh, emotional response from you? Are they telling you a story? Are they observing something? Are they talking about their own emotions in a really compelling way? How did they put a picture in your mind, perhaps? How did they inspire you to do something? So starting to take a little time to intentionally think about how the poem was constructed will help you consider building your own tools and resources as you craft poems in the future. Rather than thinking, oh, I've got to do it this way, you might go, actually, I might have 5 different ways I could go about doing this in my poem, because you have incorporated so many different styles and techniques and options into your repertoire just by being a great observer and an active participant in poetry. Talking about the poems that you're reading, it's a wonderful thing. Not only can it be a great way to share things that inspire you with other people and get them to engage with the poetry community, but it can also help you figure out what is happening here. Why do I have this response? When you talk it through with other people, practice is going to be important. We can't just passively consume poetry and expect to become better poets ourselves. So, making sure that you're taking time to write, and not just write what you want to write, but also write experimenting with some of the strategies and tools that you're learning from other writers, you're learning from craft resources, advice perhaps you're getting in this class even. And then making sure that you share. And this might be part of being a great literary citizen. And as you come across work that you really enjoy, sharing it with other people in your life so they get to know about these poets and poems and perhaps publications. Also, thinking about sharing what you're doing with other people. Even though you might not have a poem that is ready to go send off to a magazine for publication, you can share with people you trust in progress, and get some feedback as you go. It can be really scary to share, and we'll talk about that in a later lesson. But the more you share and the more it becomes a part of your practice, the easier it will get. Inspiration. We think about poems sometimes as being out there and we have to go find them and consume them. So when we are the poet, where are poems coming from? These are just a handful of first ideas I threw down because there's so many different ways poems will come to you, but certainly observation, looking around, what are you seeing? Writing that down, taking time to try and get it just right, trying to come up with comparisons that are going to help your readers see it when they just see words on the page. Life experiences, you're going to live your life and be able to talk about that. Models, other people's works, and not just necessarily poems, but you might read a biography that inspires you, a news story, you might see a movie, you might be listening to music. So all of those things that you're consuming as a reader, listener, speaker, writer, all of those are fair game for potential poems. Also, prompts. We're going to be talking about prompts a lot, and those are essentially like double dog dares where you are challenging yourself, or maybe somebody else is challenging you to write something. And it could be a leap off of an image, off of some words, off sounds. It might be challenging you to write a poem that only has one syllable words in it. It might be a challenge to write in a particular style from a point of view. So prompts can be all different types of things. There are books of prompts out there. You can find them on websites for free, lots of different ways. So it's kind of prodding you, right? Somebody's giving you that swift kick sometimes we all need in order to get started. And that can be wonderful if you're experiencing that dreaded writer's block, which often is just a I don't know how to get started, so I'm going to avoid it because it's a pain right now. Sometimes a writing prompt can get you over that hurdle, give you a place to start, and turn into something pretty wonderful and unexpected. What I would like you to do, and I'm going to set my timer here for 30 seconds, is create a list of 5 things that inspire you. So this could be to write poems. And if you are just getting started and you're not a writer of many poems, you might think about just generally what is inspiring to you beyond the world of poetry. So, 5 things that you find inspirational that gets you jazzed to go do something, that gets you feeling creative. Maybe it gets you into the kitchen trying a new recipe, right? So, 5 things. Here we go. Got 30 seconds to write them down. 3, 2, 1. All right. Hold on to that list. Writing practice. By practice, it is heavy on the practice, right? Doing things in repetition, trying out new things in order to make new skills part of your muscle memory, make yourself comfortable with trying new things. It's about doing things intentionally. And when you're thinking about your writing practice, your poetry practice, there are a lot of different things that you can do to help you move forward and grow as a communicator, as well as a writer and poet. So, one thing that you can do is practice note taking. It is pretty rare that I go, oh, I have a great idea for a poem. Let me get on my computer right now. Right? Or I just happen to have a writing utensil handy and I can just jot it down on a convenient piece of paper. Oh, me, I find that most of my ideas for poems come while I'm doing other things or I'm lying in bed trying to drift off to sleep. It's never a convenient time. I have, doing dishes and my hands are all soapy and I can't get to a cell phone or I can't get to a piece of paper. So, having perhaps a varied note taking approach can be helpful. Some people like to have a little notebook where they jot down their ideas. Other people like to use their cell phones and leave themselves voice messages or notes or reminders. Other people have Word files going on their computer or in their Google Docs where they're kind of jotting down things as they go. And always my favorite, lots of post-it notes in my office that have not just notes for poems, notes for other things too, but they help me with different projects. Another thing that you can do, besides making sure you're taking time to record your observations, record your ideas, your emotions, events, is drafting. And drafting is essentially sitting down and creating the first thing, and then later working with that. So, making sure that you give yourself time to create is really important as you develop a writing practice. It might start with just 10 to 15 minutes a week that you put into your schedule that you say, this is my time to write. And I say write and not necessarily create a poem because sometimes that 10 to 15 minutes might be reflecting on the notes you've taken that you've jotted down and taking a little bit of time to write what you remember about those things, like free writing. Other times it might be sitting down and you've got this poem in your head and you're writing it out, or maybe you have other types of writing that you like to explore as well. Playing is important. Sometimes if we put pressure on ourselves to get something very specific out perfectly the first time, all the joy is sucked out of the moment. We stress ourselves out, we create a block, we can't move through it, we don't get it done, and we end up walking away without having done anything. So if you approach your practice time, right, we're not talking about the recital, the big match. We're not talking about game on, showing everybody what you're made of. We're talking about that weekly, daily, monthly practice where you're putting the time in. So when it comes to sharing your work with others, or perhaps having someone say, hey, do you have a poem that you could share with me? On the spot, you're ready for those moments. So being playful, being experimental, taking risks, giving yourself permission to kind of turn off that editor that says, oh, this is awful. Don't go there. That's a terrible idea. Well, everybody talks about ice cream cones in the summer. No, avoid that idea, right? Instead, shut that editor off, go for it. Get it all down on the page, because then you can go through a refining or revision process. Once you have all the ideas out and you can see that text, you can decide what to do with it. The other thing that I've included here is emulating. Emulating means mimicking, repeating, doing something in the style of another writer. And so if you're feeling a little uninspired, or you would like to practice a particular technique or style of poetry, let's say you really want to write a sonnet. Well, you can find a few people who have written really great sonnets that you love and follow along with the recipe that they've created in their poem for a sonnet, and use that as a tool to help you write your own. So you might be following the same beats, that da 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 da, but you're putting in your own words, right? You might be following a similar rhyme pattern, but again, you're putting in your own words, your own ideas. So you're making it yours through that mimicry of someone that you're really interested in trying out some of the techniques that they've done. What I'd like you to do, I'm gonna get that timer again, is write down 5 things that you can do. And feel free to start with baby steps if you've never written a poem before. Give yourself permission to warm up to that. But what can you do in a given week to commit to your writing that's going to help you grow as a writer and poet, and also succeed in completing this course? So 5 little things. It might be within the areas of time management. It might be how you would like to practice. It might be when, or the different rewards you might give yourself. But I'm going to set that timer for 30 seconds, and I'd like you to write down 5 things you can do to get your writing practice started and make it successful. 3, 2, 1. All right. Hold on to that list. So we have our practice, like what can we do to get better, to become more proficient, more confident, to produce more? And then we have that writing routine, the little things that we're going to make sure that we do in order to achieve those goals. So first and foremost, putting time in the seat, right? And by that, I mean sitting down and doing the work. If my goal is to write 10 poems, if I don't give myself time to sit down and write 10 poems, that's a really great way to set myself up for failure. Another thing would be prioritizing reading, writing, revising, research. So, writing meaningful poems isn't just about sitting down and going, all right, I'm done. That can be really challenging. And sometimes we'll get started doing that, but we're not producing things that compel us or wow us as the author of those pieces. And so making sure that you give yourself time to read about or read poetry or just read generally Giving yourself time to write, giving yourself time to go back to what you've written and revise it, revision it, and giving yourself some time to do some research. We don't necessarily think about that all the time, but if there's something that you're really interested in writing about, let's say something about your family, it might be worth putting in some time to talk with other family members to get their perspective on things, to look at old photographs, go back to maybe things that you wrote at that time period in your life or that other people have recorded in some way. And so that can be really fruitful. If you're writing about social justice, you're writing about things that you've seen in the news, checking out sources of other people who've recorded those histories can help you be more accurate, help you provide interesting details. So doing a little bit of research can be helpful. If you want to write about scuba diving, and seeing that underwater world and you've never scuba dived before, I'm not saying you have to go to the YMCA and sign up for a class and jump down to the bottom of that pool, but there may be some documentaries, videos that you could watch that help give you the sense of what that's like as you live vicariously through that speaker in your poem. Scheduling. You got to do it. Got to work that writing time into your schedule, or it is so easy to just put it off, right? And it's also easy not to prioritize that time. I know personally there are things I need to get done for work, for other writers, for my family, for our pets. I got to keep our environment clean, right? And do the laundry, got to help with the food. All of these different things seem more important often than sitting down for 15 minutes and writing a poem that seems very much for me, very pleasurable for me, all about me, me, me. And it's hard for me to do that. And it might be hard for you to do that too. But if I've scheduled that time in, I know that Friday at this time, that's when I'm going to write. It's on the Google Calendar so my family can see it. It's saved so that I don't book any other meetings with other people. I'm able to actually get in that chair, put in the time. And then also connecting with other people, other writers. It might be, you know, physically connecting with people who are also interested in writing poetry, but you might also be able to connect through social media if you're kind of out there on your own and you don't know a lot of poets. Following poets, they are on Twitter, right? They are on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. They are paying their bills right now. They are writing about the world that we live in. And so there are a lot of very active poets that you can follow and say, well, what are they reading? What are they talking about? What are they writing about? And that can create kind of mentors, introduce you to new resources, ideas, give you encouragement. So there are a lot of different ways to connect. But if you don't try to cultivate that support network, again, a lot of times writing then becomes this like private me thing that it's easy to hide away and not give priority to. So making that a part of your life can be helpful. And rewarding yourself when you accomplish things. You did it, right? You sat down, you wrote 3 poems this week. When's the last time you did that? What are you going to do to celebrate, right? Um, so don't, I'm not telling you to go out and do extravagant things that put your finances in peril or anything like that. But maybe you're like, whew, I put my time in. I was in that seat for an hour. I'm going to go out and take a walk, or I'm going to take some time and listen to music. I'm going to go do a Netflix party with my friends. So giving yourself little rewards. If I get this bit done that I want to get done, then I can sit down and I can read this person's work. Right. We're going to take 30 more seconds, and I'd like you to think about what could your routine be. Think about perhaps what time of day is a really peak time for your creativity. Think about how you need to write. What kind of environment do you need? Is it good to have the music going and people talking, right? Like the old coffee shop model, being surrounded by activity and noise. Or might it be better for you to be in a very quiet place, very serene, away and apart from other people. Think about how you like to write. Typing on the computer, does that work best for you, or is it better for you to handwrite and then eventually copy over some of that stuff to the computer? Do you need to be drinking a cup of tea or coffee while you work, or is it better that you're writing on an empty stomach? The beginning of your day or the end of your day. So I'd like you to write out a routine for you to try this week. What are some things that you can do to set yourself up for success? So kind of give yourself at least a 30-minute time slot once this week. What can you do to make sure that that happens? I'm going to start the timer. Go. 3, 2, 1. All right. Hold on to that list. So notice this is blank. I'd like to have you do a brainstorm before we talk about this. To you, what are some qualities of a good poem? And you might have to think way back to the last time there was a poem in your life that you remember because you thought it was good, or this might be something you personally strive for if you've been writing poems for a long time. But I'd like you to write down 5 descriptors. What does a poem need to have or do or be in order for you personally to think it's a good poem? I'm going to set that timer, 30 seconds. Write down your 5 qualities of a good poem in your personal opinion. Let's get started. 3, 2, 1. All right. So you hold on to your list, and I'm going to share my list with you. So I did this activity before putting on the recorder here. And in my personal opinion, what gets me jazzed when I'm reading poetry are poems that welcome me in. Right? Through the title, the first few lines, I really feel invited. It doesn't feel like I'm eavesdropping on a private conversation. It doesn't feel like I'm not supposed to be the person reading this poem. It feels very comfortable. I get kind of hooked right away and just I guess I put that third, but I get a little bit lost in that world of the poem. I'm in that moment with the speaker, absorbing what is being shared with me, and nothing knocks me out of that. I also enjoy poems that are vivid, image heady. I can kind of picture them like a poem in my mind. And if not a visual poem, then I can really follow that emotional current that's happening in the poem as well, and kind of get into that experience myself. I love poems that make me feel, that make me think. There's a communication happening, even though it's not like a literal one. It's like, hey, poem, how are you? Oh, I don't know. Right? So not that kind of conversation, but there's kind of a give and take there. The poem is sharing things to me, and then I'm pulling things from my personal experience, my emotional depth, and we're going back and forth there during the course of the poem. And I also think a poem is really good when it encourages me to share it with other people. When I get done reading a poem, like, oh, I need to share this with someone's with you, right? So I want to get this out there. I want other people to read this too, and then I can talk about it. So those are poems that also are good in my opinion, or ones that get me to engage, and ones that I would want to emulate and share with other people. And notice I had you do your list and I did my list, and they might not be the same thing. And that's one really cool thing about poetry, is that there are often many different interpretations of a poem, different emotional responses, depending on what readers bring to those poems. And so poetry has a lot of room for people bringing uh, their own baggage, their own luggage with them on the trip, and getting different experiences out of that poem. So, to shift then, when you are the writer and you want to create a good poem, sometimes the content that you work with can set you up for success. And so, as you're getting started in this class and your exploration or taking it a few steps further, I'd like to share my thoughts on good poem moments. Right? So things that may not, but ideally may set you up for a really great poem. And so a lot of time observations are that I usually know something's going to be a poem and not a short story or a personal essay or just like a social media graphic with a caption, um, based on the depth of the observation that I'm making, right? If I've put something under a microscope, and I'm kind of looking at that moment, either as a freeze frame or as a little vignette, like a short moment of time, then that's usually something that I will tackle in a poem. If it's something much more involved and it's going to be like a 30-page poem, I'm I'm not sure how am I going to organize this, and there are all of these different voices and character. Well, maybe then that might be a sequence of poems that is part of a larger collection, or that might be something that I'd like to work in with prose, or use a different format for that. If I have a flash, like an intense emotion that's connected to something that I feel like I can make concrete through language, that might be a really good moment for a poem. Again, a vignette, like this one snippet of life happened. I'm going to focus in on that. Sometimes I hear language being used. I eavesdrop something, or I might see some words put together out and about, or I get an idea in my head. Um, a metaphor comes to me, or I'll see something and start describing it in my head. And oftentimes, those are moments that work their way successfully into poems. And then also sound. Sometimes something just sounds really well. I might even be starting to type in prose, and like the sentence sounds so good to me. I want to pull it out, or I'm finding that I'm being drawn to perhaps something with a steady beat, something that's using rhyme. Those might be reasons why I might choose to explore that content in a poem rather than another form. All right, getting started. We're diving in, right? We're making commitments to ourselves to find a routine in order to help develop our writing practice. We have some ideas of what makes good poems and perhaps where we can start to pull content for those poems from our lives. So, pre-writing is the next step. And again, making sure that you're writing down ideas as they come. You think, oh, I'm going to remember that tomorrow when I sit down to write. And you might have an inkling of like, oh, what was that thing? But rarely is it like that line of the poem that was just beautifully came together in your head. So do your future self a favor. Take that moment to write it down, record it in your phone, whatever you need to do. Ask somebody else to write it down for you. Journaling, right? Frequently, rather than just jotting down little, maybe you do bullet journal, but rather than just kind of like jotting down little things when they come to you, taking some time to write it out or free write, making sure that you're regularly getting those ideas on the page, and then also turning to prompts to challenge you to try new things or help you kind of dive into the pool if you need a little bit of a push or a little bit of leap from the springboard because you're, I don't know, you're looking at it, it doesn't look good to you today, you don't want to get in that cold water. Right? So, skills practice. What I'd like you to think about this week is establishing that routine and putting it to work for you. I'd also like you to create a reading list. What are some types of poetry you're interested in, or some poems that maybe you know about, or poets you've heard of that you'd like to explore in the coming weeks. So make kind of a list of things you would like to do, a to-do list for what would you like to explore. Think about how you'd like to pre-write. Are you just going to work off little notes? Would you like to do something more formal like a diary entry and do that a few times a week or even every day and pull poems from that? Do you want to free write? How do you want to do it? And give yourself a challenge to select 3 prompts this week and create 3 poems. And just see how that feels, having somebody else kind of give you a nudge and responding to that. In fact, I am going to give you a nudge to conclude our discussion today. I'd like you can pause the video and look at this as long as you'd like, to respond to the photo below. And it might be that you first start visually describing it. You might then think about recording things it makes you think of. You might start to write a little bit of a story. What's happening here? Who do those shoes belong to? Where is this? Why might people be here or not be here? You can also share emotional responses you have to seeing those socially distancing feet, right? And what might have changed in the world or your world once those stickers started going down on floors. Um, so take as much time as you need to explore your response to this photo. And when you're ready, after you've recorded it, you've either written a poem or you've done a short free write, you have a paragraph or so, move on. I hope that you got some really interesting stuff down on the page from that last photo. I know that it elicits a lot of different responses from me personally. And so it also models an opportunity for a prompt where you're responding to something that you're seeing rather than coming up with something in your mind. As we look ahead, we're going to be delving further into the topic of invention and drafting. And as we start to come up with ideas that are going to become poems, how do we make sure that we are communicating to our readers the message that we want to send and putting the images and the emotions into their minds and hearts? I can't wait. I can't wait to see what you create. I look forward to hearing about what your routine is like as it shapes in the coming weeks. And I hope that you enjoy exploring where poems come from. I'm Liz Whiteacre, and I'm so happy you're here.